2023 sucked. It sucked for me. It was one of the hardest years, but thank goddess for books because there were some that I read that just made me feel so much. It made me feel alive again instead of feeling dissociated for the entire year, because I'm not joking at all when I tell you that 2023 was rough. I read 80 books. My goal was 120, but I read 80. Out of that 80 today, I'm going to share with you the ones that made me feel the most, that helped me come back to feeling alive. If you are new to my channel, my name is Rachel. It's so awesome to meet you. If you are a returning subscriber or returning watcher, just want to say thank you so much for being here. A little bit about me. I built a six-figure online business, coaching business owners, mentoring people on their mindset and their social media strategy to build out their online brand. I did this for about 6 years. I loved it. However, it just felt like something was missing a little bit, and that's when I decided that 2024 was the year that I was going to incorporate my love for books with the love that I have for helping people make money doing what they love every day. Enough about me though, let's dive into these books. We're gonna start off with rom-com because I read the least amount of rom-coms this year. I do love rom-coms. Megan Quinn is my favorite rom-com writer. She is hilarious. Her characters embody so much humanness and so much realness, and the way that she writes them, it's just so relatable. There have been times where I have been reading Megan Quinn books and I'm literally laughing so hard that tears are coming out of my eyes. I highly suggest her. She is my favorite rom-com author of all time. I also am someone who has ADHD, and I feel like a lot of her female main characters might also have ADHD or are neurodivergent, so I relate a lot to the way that she writes her female main characters. Okay, so the first book in the rom-com category for 2023 that I really enjoyed was The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I really loved this book. And like I said, it is a romantic comedy. It's about this woman named Hannah who is actually a bodyguard. She gets hired to be the bodyguard of this celebrity that comes back into their hometown. She really doesn't like him at first, but she gets to know him slowly. It's pretty steamy, but also there's a really great plot. There's a lot of humor in it, and I just really liked it because the perspective of the woman being the bodyguard was a really interesting dynamic to read about. I definitely recommend checking out The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I would say that I gave this book probably like a 3.5. It was a really quick, fun read. The next rom-com that I really enjoyed is called Too Hot to Handle by Tessa Bailey. This is actually a part of a series called Romancing the Clarksons, and it's a really good book series. It was very interesting. I connected with almost all of the characters instantly. The Clarksons are a family of siblings. Their mother passes away and she leaves them each letters, and they kind of go on this road trip all together. It's just really beautiful to witness like the healing that's happening, the bonding that is happening, how they all see themselves, and what they thought their mom thought of them was actually really interesting too, because I feel like if you have siblings, which I do, my sister and I, we grew up in the same exact household with the same parents, but we are so different, and the way that we perceive things are just so different, and that is really written into this series in a beautiful way. Tessa Bailey did a great job with this series, so I highly recommend. There is one character in this book series that I just love. Like, he is one of my book boyfriends, and his name is Belmont. He's the oldest brother. I would also rate this book probably a 3.5. I really enjoyed it. It's not very often that I would rate a rom-com a 5, just because rom-com is not my favorite genre. It's one of my favorites, but it's not the one that I like gravitate towards naturally, I guess. The last two romance comedy books that I want to talk to you guys about are both wrote by Megan Quinn. She is my favorite. I already covered that. Highly suggest for everyone. The first one is called He's Not My Type by Megan Quinn. It is a part of the Vancouver Agitators series. It's the 4th book. This rom-com has all the things that I love: forced proximity, fake dating. Halsey, he's the main male character in this book, has had a crush on Blakely, the female main character in this book, for years. They've worked together and he's just always had a huge crush on her. She didn't know. It is such a good book, and I highly suggest the entire Vancouver Agitators series. Slowly, as you're reading those books, you start to fall more and more in love with Halsey, and then finally this year we just got his story. So I was really excited to read this book, and I devoured it very quickly because I wanted to know more about him and Blakely and just the dynamic. They were co-workers. There was no love story in any of the other books. We just noticed that Halsey had a crush on her, but in this 4th book, Megan goes way deeper into their story, and I just loved it. My top romance comedy for the year of 2023 that made my heart go pitter patter, it made me feel alive, that got me out of my dissociation because 2023 was hard for your girl is A Not So Meet Cute by Megan Quinn, of course. This is one of the cutest, most steamy, plot heavy books that I've ever read. And I loved this book so much. I was so invested in this series. This is the first book in the Kane Brothers series. The Kane Brothers series is so good. And something that Megan does in a unique way is that she does crossovers between her series. The Kane Brothers in this series actually meet the players in the Vancouver Agitators series. It's really cool. I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, like when they did crossover episodes of my favorite shows, I am a huge fan of that. To this day, I will always be a fan of that. Like Riverdale and Sabrina, loved it. I loved crossovers so much. I really enjoyed this book. The main character, Lottie, in this book, she is going through something in her life, and basically she's like, I'm gonna find a rich husband. I'm just gonna find a rich husband. So she starts walking in these really rich neighborhoods in Beverly Hills, trolling for a fake husband because she wants to make her arch nemesis jealous, and she meets Huxley Kane. They are in a fake dating relationship until it turns real. There's a little bit of enemies to lovers. They kind of don't get along at some points, but I think it's just because they're like fighting the tension that they feel towards each other. This is hands down one of my favorite romance comedy books and series. Highly suggest this one. Moving on, since we're already on the topic of romance, let's just shift into dark romance that made me feel something. I'm just gonna start this by saying dark romance is not for everybody. If you're going to check out these books, make sure you check the trigger warnings, because bestie, they can be triggering. And also, I just started reading dark romance in 2023, and when I tell you that I fell down a dark romance hole, I'm being for real. I fell down one that was a very deep hole. So I read a lot of dark romance in 2023, and I've compiled my favorite ones to share with you. First book that I read that I really loved that was dark romance is The Fae Princes by Nikki St. Crow. This is a part of her Vicious Lost Boys series. It is a Peter Pan retelling, and it is dark romance, and there is a lot of spice. And it is like dark spice, and there's just a lot, and I keep saying that, but like, holy shit. I love that series. I love those books. The fourth one was really, really good. If you are a dark romance person, I highly suggest reading the Vicious Lost Boys series. Next, we have Haunting Adeline. A couple reasons why this is on this video and my top books of 2023. Number one, this was like a deep dive into dark romance for me, and I read that this year. I actually bought this book in 2022, but after everything that I was seeing on TikTok about like ghosts and stuff, I don't fuck around with that stuff. And so I was like really scared to read this. But when we moved into our new house this year, we didn't have the internet for 6 weeks. So I had already had Haunting Adeline downloaded on my Kindle. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna try again. And then I really actually enjoyed it. I really love the way that H.D. Carlton writes her books. Again, with this book, you guys, this is hella dark romance, like very dark. So check trigger warnings. I'm gonna remind you guys for every single one of these to check the trigger warnings. I did not know until I read this book. How do I even say this? When I started reading this book and seeing all this stuff on TikTok and all this stuff on Instagram, I thought, a stalker? A stalking book? A stalking trope? I've never heard of that. Why would people want that? I don't know if I would like that. Then I read the book and I was like, girl, H.D. Carlton, what did you do to me? You just unlocked some things out of me that I didn't even know were there. So, Zaid, the main character in this book. Yeah, Zaid and Addie. I love the dynamic between them. They are both very strong main characters. There's a lot of shit online about this book. There are a lot of readers who are like, I don't like it. There are a lot of people who are obsessed with it. Everybody has their own opinion and their own likes. For me, I really liked this book because it kind of opened the door for me to go into dark romance. It gave me insights on stuff that I didn't even know were a thing that I enjoyed, and I just really liked this book. I will say, I did read the second book too. It's called Haunting Adeline. I was not such a fan of that one. The only reason is because I have SA trauma myself, and the second book was very heavy for me personally. I'm glad I read it once I finished it. This one, Haunting Adeline, was like a 4-star read for me, and Haunting Adeline, I would say like was not close to that, just because of my own triggers and like my own trauma and stuff like that. I would recommend this book if you do enjoy dark romance. I thought it was really good. I love H.D. Carlton's writing. One of my favorite books of all time is written by her. I'll tell you about it in a second, but like, I love her writing. I cannot wait for her new book that's coming out called Where's Molly? The next dark romance that we're going to talk about is Praise by Sarah Kate. And Praise is a part of the Salacious Players Club. This series, speechless. It was so good. I had no idea that I would enjoy this. It's about this group of friends that decide to open a sex club. It's amazing. It's so good. Dark romance, very smutty, very spicy. The main character, Emery, in the first book, obsessed. He's a hottie biscotti. Highly suggest checking out Praise by Sarah Kate. I would say it was like a 3.5 or a 4-star read for me. I really liked it. There were some very, very spicy, smutty scenes that were just chef's kiss. Loved. The next book that I read is the Mindfuck series by Saint Abby. If you read this on Kindle, this is actually 5 separate books and they just compiled them all together. So I counted it as 5 different books on my reading challenge because that's how you have to download them on Kindle. I mean, if you read the physical copy, I don't know, you do you, integrity and all that, but I had to purchase 5 separate books and then I bought the physical copy because I liked this series so much. This is deep. This has a lot of dark romance. This is about a female main character who goes through some massive trauma and some SA, and then what happens from that is she starts to plot her revenge and she takes out these people one by one. I fucking loved this book. I felt so empowered after reading about her story, maybe because of my own trauma and my own experiences with SA, but like this was very cathartic for me to read in a way, and also a little bit triggering in other ways. So again, remember to check the trigger warnings. The female main character went through a lot of hard stuff, and this book is very descriptive with the scenes. So that is one thing, like if SA is really rough for you to read about, or you know, you have trauma around that, I would say maybe this won't be the book for you, but you can definitely check the trigger warnings and look up online exactly what the warnings are. Like I said, I felt really empowered by this book. I saw myself in her, and so while she was getting her revenge and she was taking her power back one by one from all of the people who hurt her, it just felt so good to be there and relate to her. I loved this book. The Predator by Runix. I really loved this book series and I binged it so quick. There was a moment before our move where I was trying to do a dark romance vlog for 7 days and I read 10 dark romance books, but I realized like last week when I was going to edit that video for you guys that half of the content got lost during the move. It was on a different SD card and it disappeared. I really enjoyed this series. It is hardcore enemies to lovers. The female main character has the intent of killing the male main character, and what happens is they actually strike a deal to help each other because they have a common enemy. I love this. I read it so fast. It was like crack for me. Highly suggest this book series. Highly, highly suggest. If you're into dark romance, again, check trigger warnings. You guys are probably gonna get sick of hearing me say check trigger warnings, but I don't want anyone on my channel to read something that like massively sets them back in their healing journey or activates their nervous system in an unhealthy way. Like, I don't want to do that to you guys. So just make sure that you're checking the trigger warnings, because although I read a lot of dark romance and I've gotten to a point where the more trigger warnings there are, the more likely I'm going to read that book, that is not how it started for me. I built my way up to where I am now with reading dark romance. So I just want to remind everybody that. The next book that we have for dark romance that made me feel a lot of things is The Ritual by Chantal Tessier. So I actually bought this book for that 7-day dark romance vlog read. This is the Lord series, a dark college romance. I really loved the world building in this. It's kind of like mafia style, mob style. It kind of reminded me a little bit modern day Peaky Blinders is kind of the vibe that I got. In this book, there are some massive BDSM, like some massive submissive, dominant type of energies. So if you like that, you definitely need to read this series because you will really enjoy it. I love the world building in this. It was very deep and very complex. Every single one of these books was really interesting. I did read the last one. I believe it's called Carnage. I didn't like it as much as the first like 4, but overall it was a really good series, and this book was super good. It made me feel a lot of things and have a lot of insights onto, again, things that I enjoy that I never thought I would enjoy in a book. I think that most people, when they think about reading, I don't know if this is most people or just me, but I feel like a lot of people either go to fantasy or they go to romance when they're like fiction readers. But dark romance can be really intriguing and offer a lot of different complex worlds. Definitely suggest this book. Now, I have one more book that I have listed as dark romance, but I'm gonna save it for after fantasy because this was in the top 3 of my favorite books the entire year. Like, I still think about this book on the daily. And I read it in the beginning of 2023, and I still think about it. It still comes into my consciousness, but I'm going to share it at the end with you when I go over my top 5 books of 2023. Okay, so now we are hopping into fantasy. I don't have a lot of these in physical copy yet, just because while I was reading a lot of these, that's when we were in the middle of our move, so I didn't want to order more books when we were in the middle of moving, and I still haven't gotten my bookshelves up yet. Sad face. But a lot of these I'm definitely going to order and use as little trophies on my bookshelf because they were so good. The first one that I want to talk about is Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. Carissa Broadbent also wrote The Serpent and the Wings of Night, which, wink wink, will be at the end of this video. The Daughter of No Worlds is a part of the War of Lost Hearts series by Carissa Broadbent. I really loved this book series. It actually reminded me a lot of Throne of Glass. The main character in Daughter of No Worlds was so similar to Aelin. It was insane. It was mind-blowing, but you could tell that Carissa Broadbent literally took time to write this character and not that she just copied and pasted Aelin from Throne of Glass. It wasn't like that at all. There was just a lot of similarities between their personalities and the way that they talked and their style and just their expression of self within the book. So I really love that. I am an Aelin fan forever. She's my top female character in all of SJM universe, of all of Sarah J Maas. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we need to have a video dedicated just to Sarah J Maas books. I think some people say Sarah J Maas and I say Maas. I don't know why. So either Maas or Moss, tomato, tomato, whatever. But Aelin is my favorite. So reading Daughter of No Worlds and the fact that it gave me a similar vibe to Throne of Glass is just out of this world. I loved that series. Highly, highly suggest. I love any books that have strong lead female characters that don't just do what they're told. And that's probably just because I am a rebel myself, so I feel like that part of me really relates with them when I'm reading their characters and just about their life. The next book in the fantasy realm is A Duet with the Siren Duke by Elise Kova. If you watched my first video I ever put out on BookTube, you can check it out here or here. I'll link it for you guys. I recommend a book that Elise Kova wrote. She does really beautiful fantasy. They're standalone books that are kind of in the same universe, in the same world, so it's kind of cool because you don't have to keep reading if you don't want to, but they also interweave a little bit. I feel like her books are a little bit more like young adult mixed with new adult, especially this last one, A Duet with the Siren Duke. It was a little more steamy than her other ones, so I really enjoyed that. It was about this Siren Duke. He is like a merman kind of thing, and it's basically forced proximity and they fall in love under the sea. It's just such a good read and really interesting. This is probably TMI. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on the internet, but I've always wondered how like a merman for spicy romance would like,
you know what I'm saying? Like do the thing. How would he do the thing if he has a tail?
but they cover that in this book and it was really intriguing. Oh my god. Anyways, definitely check out A Duet with the Siren Duke by Elise Kova. Elise Kova, hands down, her world building is amazing. It's not a lot of steam, spice, or smut. There's a lot of plot in it. Always, the magic system in her world building is always very, very interesting, especially with this one because I haven't read a lot of mermaid books or people who live in the sea books or creatures who live in the sea fantasy. I haven't read a lot of those and I really enjoyed her take on this. It was really, really interesting and a very quick read. I think I read it in a day. Then we have a a book series that I have not seen mainstream very much at all. I need to do a review on this book series in Goodreads and on my website. It is the Wraith Kings series. First book is called Radiance by Grace Draven. I loved this book series. It really reminded me of the feelings that I got during reading ACOTAR. It's a longer series. The magical system is amazing. The world building is absolutely amazing. There is spice, there is smut, so that's always a plus in my world. I definitely suggest checking out the Wraith Kings series. I'm not gonna give you too much also because I read it a while ago, but I do remember the magic system being different than anything that I've ever read before. The creatures in this realm just look different than any creatures I've ever read about. So that was also really intriguing. Grace Draven's writing is very similar to one of my favorite young adult series that I've ever read by Sabaa Tahir. And the first book in that specific series that Radiance reminds me of is called An Ember in the Ashes. So if you read An Ember in the Ashes, you will definitely like the Wraith King series, starting out with that first book, Radiance. The last book that I have in the fantasy genre in these 2023 books that made me feel alive was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So it's really interesting because this blew up on TikTok like 2 years ago, but I had my inner rebel coming out like, oh, we're not gonna read that. Then one of my besties told me that that was one of her favorite books she's ever read. And she was like, you just have to get through it. And I was like, girl, it was so slow in the beginning. She's like, you just have to get through it. Trust me. So I trusted her and I read that book and I really loved it. The world building and the magic system in that book is so like out of this world, mind blowing. I don't want to give you guys too much, but basically like Addie LaRue cannot leave her impression on the world. Everything she does gets erased, hence why the title is called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And it is so interesting putting yourself in her shoes while she's trying to live a life, but everything she does is instantly forgotten is just really sad and a little traumatic. I remember reading that book and like crying a little bit. That one is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. The ending of that book, what I will say, if you don't like cliffhangers, don't read that book. It leaves you wondering. It's kind of like the ending of Verity where you're like, so is it this or is it not? And there's no definitive answer that you get. So I guess that's good because it leaves you thinking. Like I still think about the end of that book like just, what is she doing? Is she actually playing or is she not? Is she playing along? Is she not? I don't know. I don't want to give too much away, but that book was definitely interesting. And it was a different type of fantasy that I've ever read before. Not my typical read, but I'm really glad that I read it. Finally, it's time for my top 5 books from 2023 and the reveal of those. This top 5 is really all over the place. Some might say that a couple of them are a little bit basic, but don't judge me, okay? I like what I like, and it's okay to like what you like, even if other people think you shouldn't. Fuck them, you know? If you like a certain book, read it, review it. There's gonna be people that like that book too. I'm giving you a pep talk and I'm also giving myself a pep talk because I don't want to be judged, but also it is what it is. These are the kind of books that I like. So going from lowest to highest in my top 5 favorite books of 2023. Number 5 is The Serpent and Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This is a vampire book. And let me tell you, number 1, the world building in this book is so interesting. It kind of reminds me of Crescent City meets ACOTAR meets Vampire Diaries, also meets dystopian Hunger Games vibes. This was a really interesting read. I cannot wait for the 3rd book to come out. I devoured this book, and then when the 2nd one was released, I devoured that. I love these books. I am also a massive vampire fan. I'm gonna tell you guys that right now. We have a vampire video coming up soon. I've always been obsessed with vampires. I think it started from, I was gonna say it started from Twilight, but that's not even true. It started from the Hex Girls in Scooby-Doo. When I was a child, I was like, oh my God, everything about them. I love them, their style, their singing, their hair, their vampires. Oh my God. That's when the obsession started, and it quickly grew into adulthood. So I am that person, hands down, that if there is a new vampire book, a new vampire movie, it doesn't matter if it's shit or not, I'm going to watch it, I'm going to read it because I am invested in being a vampire fan, okay? This book was so good. Rain, which is the male main character in this book, giving massive Team Damon vibes. So if you are a Team Damon person, read this book, I'm telling you. Oriah reminds me of the main character in Assassin's Blade in the Throne of Glass series. She is a badass, she's an assassin, she is trained her whole life. She's an amazing female main character, and the way that Rain, her love interest in this book, matches her energy and also supports her, it's so good. And there's a lot of twists and turns in this book, so I definitely suggest reading this. This was number 5 in 2023. Okay, this is kind of hard. I don't know, I don't like reading books because I feel like I'm gonna hurt their feelings. They're inanimate objects, but if you know, you know. That's on hashtag trauma, I think. Okay, I'm gonna do these together, I guess, because I feel bad rating one over the other. So 4 and book 3 are The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros and also Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Both of these are my 4th and my 3rd. I loved these books. I love this series. People seriously be hating over this book. I liked it. I love dragons. I loved the fact that they were in a college. It was also like kind of paralleled and inspired by military, which I was in the Air Force. I really just loved these books. I loved them. I also am a massive fan of House of Dragons on HBO and Game of Thrones. So dragon anything for me, it's a hell yes. I loved these books. I think I read this one in a half a day. I read this in a day. I went to a local Barnes & Noble at 9 o'clock the night before for a midnight release launch of this book so I could get the special edition with the black edges. Little did I know that I already ordered it off of Amazon with the black edges, so I didn't have to go to the midnight release. I did go with a bestie. It was a lot of fun. I started reading the book that night and I finished it the next day, midday. These books are so good. Please read these. If you are a fantasy lover, if you liked ACOTAR, you will love these books, I'm telling you. So number 4 and number 3 are Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. This next part is so hard because these are my top 2 books of 2023. And to be quite honest with you, I think these are my top 2 books I've ever read. And they will probably stay in my top 10 books that I've read my entire life. And they're very different, so it's really interesting. I think I'm gonna have to say that my number 2 favorite book of 2023 and my number 2 favorite book so far in my life is Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. I am obsessed with this book. I love this book. I still have scenes from this book living rent-free in my head. The writing, I love H.D. Carlton's writing. It is so intriguing to me and it captivates me instantly. There's so many guesses that happen in this book. There are so many times in this book that I was just like, what? What? There's twists, there's turns, the spicy scenes. Miss ma'am, the spicy scenes? Holy shit. The spicy scenes. There's one scene in this book that I will never forget for the rest of my life. If you are a dark romance person, please read this book. I loved it. I loved the plot. I loved the spice. I loved the characters, both of them. Just obsessed. This was a 5-star read easily. So easily. This book. Just so good. It also helps that the male main character's name is Enzo. And again, I'm a Vampire Diaries fan, so every time that I read Enzo's POV or I read about him, I pictured him as Enzo from the Vampire Diaries. So the female main character, Sawyer, she has went through so much in her life. She has had to endure so much. She's had to pave her own path. Whether it's right or it's wrong the way that she did it, she did everything she needed to in order to survive. And I love her. Her courage and just like her humor, and her and Enzo together, obsessed. Especially if you get them on a boat, let me tell you, in the middle of the ocean. Like, oh, just read this. That's all I can say. My favorite book of 2023 and my favorite book that I have ever read to this day is actually a fanfic. I had no idea what that meant before 2023. I didn't know what a fanfic was. Basically, it's a book written by an author who is a part of a fandom. And when I tell you that this book gave me all the feels, like I'm telling you all the feels, I was crying. I was like,
this is some spicy spice.
I was confused. I was distraught. I was happy, elated. I was joyful and grateful. Oh my God, there were so many feelings that came through during reading this book. And I actually read this in December. Flew through this book. Here's the thing with this book that kind of is a hard pill to swallow. Because it is a fanfic, it is illegal for people to sell physical copies. If you want a physical copy of this, you have to buy the products to bind it yourself, and you can go to the online platform and print all of the pages out and then bind it in a book binding yourself, or you can have a friend do it. You can't buy this book in physical copy anymore unless you want to bind it yourself, which is really sad because I'm not crafty at all, and I really, really need this book on my shelf. So bad. Like, I need this. So if you know anyone who does binding and wants to gift me a book, or if I have any friends that are good at crafts and would like to surprise me with a binded edition of this book, I would be forever grateful. This book is Manacled by Sen Lan Yu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is the Dramini fanfic. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, this is a Harry Potter fanfic. This book is based out of the Harry Potter wizarding world.
It's a really hard tongue twister to say.
And this writer is absolutely amazing. I loved Harry Potter before I read this book, but this just took my love of Harry Potter to an entirely new level. There is so much depth that she goes into when she's talking about the world. You get so much more insights into the magical system. This book was so good on a very foundational level because instead of having to do massive world building, this author just got to deepen it and got to expand in the knowledge that we already have, which I really loved. I felt like I just fell so much more in love with the wizarding world of Harry Potter. This is a Hermione and Draco POV. They are one another's love interest in this book. It is a mixture between Harry Potter and The Handmaid's Tale. I would consider this as being fantasy and also dark romance personally, because there are some very, very dark scenes in this book. Check the trigger warnings for this. You might think like, oh, well, it's a Harry Potter fanfic. How bad could it be? Check the trigger warnings, okay? Because there is a lot of spice and there is a lot of non-consensual ish spice too. There was a part during this book that I was like, everybody went crazy about this with the Hermione love story. How? Because there were some really dark parts. And then at the end, obviously, I was like, oh my God, I love them together and all of this. But your mind gets a little confused as to like, how can this possibly turn out good? And how can I fall in love with them as a couple? You will possibly. Some people I've seen didn't fall in love with them as a couple, but really enjoyed this book. Feel like I'm going on a total tangent, but when I tell you that this is my #1 book that I've ever read, it is because the plot, it is because we just got so much deeper in the world building. It's because of the relationship. It is just because of the feelings that this elicit, the way that the writer conveyed very real situations that happen in the world through this fantasy experience was so good. Phenomenal. Easy 5-star read. I mean, this and Does It Hurt are the easiest 5 stars I've given away. And they are so different, but they did it for me. So much depth in both of these books. There you have it. Those are my top books of 2023, the books that made me feel alive. And also my top 5 reads of 2023 and my top 2 books ever so far that I'm just obsessed with. If you've read any of these books, make sure you comment below. I'm so curious to hear about your opinions, especially if you read Manacled, or if you're gonna put any of these books on your TBR. Let me know how it goes after you read them. Come back to this video and comment. I love talking about books, especially all of these books. These are my favorites of 2023, so of course, let's talk about it. If you've already read any of these, let me know what you think. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. 2023 was a really hard year for me, and on a serious note, having books in my life just brought so much joy and so much aliveness to me during a time that it was really hard to create that for myself. So I am forever grateful for these reads. I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will talk to you very soon.
Now, this is a Harry Potter fanfic. There are people like watching me film outside, and it's so nerve-wracking for an introvert. Like, oh my God, don't watch. Please don't, I'm not here.